earlier exams, na? Which semester?
Second semester.
Second semester. Whether they will be held now along with the, what's the scene like? All
No,
very unclear. The first year is even harder. They didn't even have a semester yet. They are still holding on the first semester while the second semester is still to be held. संयम दुआ चला गया फिर से. He's in our class and has still date not added his section. I'm quite surprised at the low number of students joining the class. We have only 3 students. संयम दुआ जी, नमस्ते.
नमस्ते मैम.
आप किस सेक्शन में पढ़ते हैं? हाँ जी संयम जी, आप किस सेक्शन में हैं? तो आपका सेक्शन ए आपके नाम के आगे क्यों नहीं लगा हुआ? कोई खास वजह? जिससे आपने 1.5 महीना भी हो गया, क्या 2 महीने होने वाले हैं, अभी तक अपने नाम के आगे सेक्शन नंबर अल्फाबेट नहीं लगाया? आप चैट में जवाब दे सकते हैं, मैं पढ़ रही हूँ, क्या लिख रही हूँ. संयम, आई एम वेटिंग फॉर एन आंसर.
Ma'am, he has left.
अच्छा, यहाँ तो दिख रहा था अभी तक, अब चला गया. चलिए, let's start. We cannot have time for this conversation unnecessarily. So do we have any thoughts about what we have discussed so far? In relation to LGBT community, can we have one thing which you have learned? We can go around the room and everybody tell me one thing that you have learned about LGBT community. We start with Ankit, then Ayushi, Amisha, Bharti, Kriti, Kapil, Abhinandan, Parisha, and Nitesh.
Ma'am, we have learned so many things, but I believe in the LGBT, we haven't learned anything about the LGB. We have learned mostly about the transgender community.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, I believe, what is missing. Um, Apart from that, from the from what we
What?
have
No,
learned.
no, no. Hold on, Ankit. Why do you say though? What is the judgment of Jauhar's case is about? Is it on
It,
T or is it on LG?
it is certainly on all the groups, but I believe
No,
the
it's not.
folk.
No, no, no. Jauhar is not on all the groups. It's not on T. It is only on
Yeah.
LG.
Hmm. But I may be wrong, but I believe we haven't had a kind of a conversation or articles that we have read or we
So
have.
377 is about
Yes,
who?
it is about the
Arvind,
LGBT.
Arvind Narayan. Arvind Narayan is on whom?
It is.
Then we can
As I
actually
said, I may
say,
be
no,
wrong.
actually we can say that we have got very little written material on L. G we have
Yes,
enough. G
yes,
and H we have enough. T also we have enough. Very little written on L. That's what that I'll
and
agree.
the.
Ayushi, anything you have learned about LGBT?
Ma'am, before this class, actually, there was a common notion, and it was even I to believe that in that thing, if the sexual preferences of these people are different, that means these people are different. So I wasn't aware. It's only the sexual preference which is different and which is up to them only. I mean, I am no one to judge or to say anything about it. So it was a very mind-opening thing for me to understand that point. Only that thing is completely different, and that is up to them. And they are
Mm-hmm.
like me only. I mean, it's before it wasn't like that, and now I know that everybody is like I mean, whom I'm going to choose and whom not, it's just up to them or up to me. Nobody's going to question that, and why anybody or why we are giving the right to anybody to judge on that particular point. I mean, it's my private sphere. What am I doing? And so this was important. Then further, when I read the complete article of Arvind Narain, and it was three horrifying experiences which were there in that Taj Muhammad and Meena Wala, and more instances were there. And I was very horrified to see if I am something different and I am experiencing in my own society. So that is a trauma for those people, and we are not even acknowledging the fact that there is something which is going on in the society. We are much more or less, we are ignorant to the fact. So this was okay, then we have to, like, they are the part of the society. So that's what I understood through this complete LGBT rights. And before, even I was confused that what are they demanding, what are their needs, and actually what they want to what they're asking from the law. So I think this is what I understood from all the readings and everything like that.
Okay. Amisha,
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am,
anything?
from what I have read about transgender and transsexuals, about in all the readings that I've come across, that I used to understand that everybody is almost just the same. Third gender, I did not find it problematic at all. But then I did come across the fact that that uh, the definition of normal has been prescribed from our perspective, and we are calling them special, but they are not special or anything different from all of us. So that's kind of an eye opener for me. And then the reading of Arvind Narayan, wherein it begins from saying that we are tolerant of the tolerant is a problematic word, because we become tolerant of somebody whom we consider as inferior, whom we considered as someone who's at a lower position than us. And that I found very enlightening. Also also that there are 58 more variants, and not just one or two gender that we actually bind them into. So that's also the learnings that I've come across.
Good. Kapil,
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, just we discussed that some special provision for the transgender community, मैम मैम तो फिर उनको मैम कम्युनिटी से हम एक्सक्लूजन नहीं कर देंगे मैम, एक तरीके से उनके लिए स्पेशल प्रोविजन हम बना देंगे, जैसे स्कूल
mm-hmm.
कॉलेजेस या बाथरूम। तो मैम वो उनके लिए फिर तो वो वही रह जाएगा, जैसे वो भी फील करते हैं कि हम बिल्कुल सोसाइटी से अलग हैं। तो मैम दिस इज़ नॉट द राइट थिंग टू डू।
Mm-hmm.
मैम को अगर कम्युनिटी में रहना है तो मैम उनको जैसे अभी है वो, उन्हें कोई स्पेशल प्रोविजन ना देके उनके लिए कुछ हेल्पफुल या फिर कुछ मैम कुछ तरीके के गाइडेंस या ये सब करके कम्युनिटी में ये उनको एक्सक्लूड ना किया जाए कम्युनिटी से।
हाँ, स्पेशल तो
वो
हो सकते हैं मगर एक्सक्लूशनरी होने की जरूरत नहीं है।
यस मैम।
गुड पॉइंट। अभिनंदन,
मैम मेरा मानना है कि ये एलजीबीटी या कोई भी जेंडर स्पेशल नहीं है। सब सब कुछ नॉर्मल है, लेकिन क्या है कि हमारा समाज इस तरह से व्यवस्थित है कि मेल और फीमेल केवल 2 ही जेंडर गिने जाते हैं, बाकी सब हटा दिए जाते हैं। तो सब जो भी अलग जेंडर है मैम, मेल या फीमेल में भी सबको मैम लड़ना पड़ेगा अपने अधिकार के लिए।
हम्म,
हर गरीब आदमी को लड़ना पड़ता है अपने अधिकार के लिए मैम, बड़े से। वैसे ही है मैडम, उसमें भी इन लोगों के क्या कि अपने समाज का सिस्टम इस तरह से बन गया है कि हम आप समझ रहे हैं ना कि समाज सिस्टम इस हिसाब से बना है कि उन लोगों की गिनती नहीं होती है।
हाँ, ये
तो
ये ये नॉलेज आपको कोर्स से पहले थी कि इसके ये नॉलेज आपको कोर्स में आई है?
नहीं मैम, ये सामान्य ज्ञान तो मैम मेरे को पहले से था।
हाँ, तो हम ये जानना चाह रहे हैं कि इस कोर्स में जो हमने बातें की, जो हमने रीडिंग्स पढ़ी, उनसे कुछ नई जानकारी मिली आपको?
मैम वैसा तो मैम ऐसा मैं कुछ बोल नहीं पाऊंगा, क्योंकि
हम्म
लगभग बातें हमको ऐसा लगता है कि बातें घुमा फिरा के या ज्यादा डिटेल में वही बातें बोल दी जाती हैं।
हम्म
लेकिन कोई भी अलग आदमी अलग या कोई भी जेंडर अलग नहीं है मैम।
हम्म
उनको किसी भी चीज को, अगर मान लीजिए हमने ट्रांसजेंडर को एक कोटा दे दिया,
हम्म
तो मतलब कि वो कहीं न कहीं से छोटे दर्जे में है, तब उसको कोटा दे करके हम उसको इक्वलिटी पे ला रहे हैं।
हम्म।
मेरा ऐसा मानना है
तो ये सही है कि गलत है?
मैम। मेरे हिसाब से तो हमको लगता है कि गलत है
तो फिर क्या करना चाहिए सही करने के लिए?
मैम। जैसे कि मैम अभी इक्वलिटी, हम लोग बोलते हैं कि समाज में इक्वलिटी है, लेकिन इक्वलिटी वास्तविकता में नहीं है।
हाँ, तो जब वास्तविकता नहीं है तो क्या किया जाए जिससे वास्तविकता में इक्वालिटी आ जाए?
मैम जैसे कोटा का अगर हम दे रहे हैं,
हम्म
तो सबको कोटा दो कि जिसके जितने परसेंटेज हैं उसको
हम्म
मान लीजिए एक समाज में 100 लोग हैं, जिसमें
हम्म
100 में 25 मेल हैं,
हम्म
25 फीमेल है, या और 50 में बाकी सब हैं। तो जिनकी
हम्म।
संख्या जितनी है उनको उतने हिसाब से फिक्स कर दिया जाए, तो किसी के लिए कोई स्पेशल नहीं रह जाएगा।
तो आप तो कह रहे हो कोटा देना चाहिए फिर हमें।
नहीं तो मैडम, अभी क्या कि वैसा नहीं है। अभी एक जनरल कोटा अलग बना रखा है, या
हम्म
वो अलग बना रखा है, तो उन जो जनरल वाले तो मतलब जनरल हो गए, और जो
हम्म
जनरल नहीं है वो स्पेशल हो गए, उनको कोटा दे दिया
हम्म।
वैसा।
तो
जो
आपके लिए
सबको
कोटा तो होना चाहिए मगर परसेंटेज वाइज होना चाहिए।
हाँ मैम, जिनकी जितनी संख्याएं हैं उनको
हम्म।
उस हिसाब से दे कर सकते हैं। अब जैसे कि
आपकी क्या जानकारी है इस बारे में कि जो जनरल में लोग हैं वो 50% से ज्यादा हैं कि कम है?
मैम उस विषय में जानकारी नहीं है,
तो
लेकिन
जानकारी तो लेनी पड़ेगी ना, जब हम अगर प्रपोर्शन की बात कर रहे हैं तो वो
हाँ।
जानकारी निकालनी पड़ेगी कि जो अभी कोटा
यस मैम।
सिस्टम है वो सही है कि गलत है। तो थोड़ी जानकारी और बढ़ाइए, फिर देखते हैं, फिर अब वापिस आके बताइएगा कि आपका क्या प्रपोजल है, किस ग्रुप की, कितने तो ग्रुप्स हैं हमारे यहाँ, और किस ग्रुप्स की कितनी परसेंटेज होनी चाहिए। ठीक है?
ओके मैम।
कुंदन
थैंक यू।
कुमार। कुंदन, पहले मैंने नाम नोटिस नहीं किया है, पता नहीं पहली दफा आए हैं कि पहले से भी आते रहे हैं। कुंदन, आप सुन पा रहे हैं हमें? नो, इन दी टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया वो पहले होता था ना एक ऐसे क्या बोलते थे वो, प्लेनचेट के क्या बोलते थे, जैसे ना हाथ रख करके सब लोग बैठते थे, आत्मा को बुलाते थे। तो उसमें कहते आपको मेरी आवाज सुनाई दे रही है? कहते न्यू द 21st century, that document is Zoom meetings only, this virtual meetings। आपको मुझे सुनाई दे रही है? आप कुछ हमें लिख के बता दीजिए कि आप कुछ एक्शन, कोई हमें इंडिकेशन दीजिए कि आप सुन पा रहे हैं। तो कुंदन के साथ हमें वही करना पड़ रहा है, पर शायद वो अभी यहाँ उनकी सोल प्रेजेंट नहीं है, वो सिर्फ लॉग्ड इन है यहाँ। तो सौम्या, सौम्या, आप तो यहाँ अक्सर प्रेजेंट रहती हैं।
Yes, ma'am.
बताएं।
Ma'am, I joined late. I'm so sorry. What is the question?
No, we're just asking, going, no, just having a reflection on if there is anything new we have learned about LGBT
Um,
in our discussions and readings.
The greater understanding of the legislation. Like previously, I have tried to try to read about the queer community and otherwise. So it was just interesting to have the knowledge of. I hadn't read the Nalsa judgment earlier or the Transgender Act. Like I had read about the discourse around the Transgender Act and tried to participate in the protests, but not very actively even then. So the legislations and law and how um, how our society has moved forward or backwards in dealing with the community. That's been interesting so far, and that's what I've learned so far. Yeah.
Okay. Parisha? Parisha, are you here? आपकी आत्मा यहाँ है. I think इनकी भी आत्मा यहाँ नहीं है अभी. So, okay, we're moving on to the next leg of our discussion on the international developments. What has been the law relating to the issues. So what are the primary issue in gender justice course? Is the issue of equality and inclusion. So from that perspective, that what has been the internationally accepted norms or at least propagated norms? So where do we want to start? In our materials, we have kind of mentioned from UDHR, but prior to that also we've had instruments. Anyone well versed with the international developments? What is the first document we will say relates to human rights? My sense is Magna Carta. I do not know whether that's the right position or not, but somewhere starting with that, we've got many, and some of those we have identified in our list of readings. And today I changed the folder to give a sequence, it kind of gives us a sense of how the developments have happened over the years. And when we look at this set of instruments we have included, first of all, we have UDHR, United Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. Then we have developments in 1966, ICCPR and ICSSR. Then we have CEDAW in 1979. And at the international level, we have this document called Yogyakarta Principles, but this is not a document from the UN. It is a document created independently by concerned influential peoples around the world. Then we are back to the committee constituted under ICCPR, the Human Rights Committee. And then we have given certain resolutions by them. And then we have certain additions, additional 10 principles which have been added to the 2007 document. So when you look at the UDHR, anyone who can identify what are the important provisions in UDHR, which have actually made the basis for equality of transgender persons as well. Anyone who had no, okay, even you don't know, then take out, open from the net, UDHR, Article 1. You can look at our case material also, the document is there as well. So open the document. Who all have, raise your hands, who all have got the document in front of you? got Ayushi, Ankit, Soumya, Amisha, Kapil, Abhinandan. Others also kindly open and read the opening part, not Article 1, before that. What is the initial statement introducing the declaration? Abhinandan, will you please read? Will somebody else read?
The preamble, like the first few lines.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. Whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Whereas it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations, whereas the peoples of United Nations have in the Charter reaffirmed their faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in the equal rights of men and women, and have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Whereas member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the UN, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Whereas a common understanding of these rights and freedoms is of the greatest importance for the full realization of this pledge. Now, therefore, the GA proclaims the UDHR as a common standard for all peoples and nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure the universal and effective recognition and observance both among the people of member states themselves and among the people of territories under their jurisdiction. That's the preamble.
Great. When you read this language, what are the words which are inclusive? And certainly, this 1948, we did not have so much awareness about the language being very male oriented. And certainly, the words used, one is the human family. So, who are the humans is your first question, because only those people who are considered as human at different points of time, and we know that in different eras, not all human beings were considered as human. So that's one kind of consideration we have. The other is, and throughout the document, sometimes we have used the word persons, sometimes we have used the word man and woman. So certainly, 1948, there was no recognition or there was no use of the term relating to the people who were not men and women. So whether the word person in this document would include the third, while the rest of the document is using only men and women. And of course, that has been the argument that the when you look at, so in this also we have one occasion when the words used are men, and then we have another occasion when it says men and women. So by the English language, we know that men has said to be inclusive of the women, and he is inclusive of she. That's how the language has worked all this while. So even women were not the primary actors, they were included in the primary actor, which was the men. And some places there is a specific recognition of women, but certainly there's no mention whatsoever in UDHR of the others or the third. But the moment, the fact that it does talk about human beings, and we do recognize that third are also human beings, therefore this has become the foundation on which the whole edifice of human rights for the third have been built up. So first article in this document uses the word all persons. Where is this document? All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and right. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Again, it's not humanhood, it is not sisterhood, it is brotherhood. You know the word Hooper? Have you heard the word Hooper?
No,
This
ma'am.
is Professor Bakshi's coining. He says, human has man in it and person has son in it. So he says we have to refer to us as Hooper. So when we say mankind, when we say brotherhood, we certainly know that technically speaking, it includes all people. But when it uses the masculine terms, it creates a mental image of men in those situations. Certainly, if there are only a group of women, we will not refer to it as a brotherhood. But if you say, but at the other hand, we say, no, brotherhood would include sisters. So we say the women connect to each other as sisterhood. Men connect to each other with one another as brotherhood. So at one level, we say brotherhood would include women also. But if it is only women, then they are not part of the brotherhood. So somewhere this dichotomy or the different perceptions about the context in which the words are used also determine the content of those words. But anyway, the first Article 1 has been the one which has been used in all subsequent documents to say that if this is what we have recognized, then you cannot say that the third, the other, the different people are not included in. It says all human beings are born free and equal, and this is what every group of people who is deprived, marginalized is claiming to be and claiming this position. Then I think I want us to look at Article 2. The word there is again, no discrimination on the basis of a whole range of things are there: race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. So going by Nas Foundation and then Navtej Singh Johar, the word sex in our context certainly includes sexual orientation as well. And then we want to look at Article 5. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Remember why I'm kind of pointing out through some of these articles is that when we looked at our legislation yesterday to the Transgender Persons Act, these were some of the aspects which have been addressed. And the fact that the special provision has, special mention has been made of these aspects is a legal recognition that this is not available to them, even though we had declared this to be the human right in 1948. So 1948 now is 80 years. 80 years on, we still are in are at a place where something which was considered to be basic for human existence. And remember, human rights are not the ones which are given by the state. These are given to us because of the fact of us being human. So something which has been considered pre-state, pre-legislation, pre-constitution, there are lots of people who still do not have that. And the groups that we are focusing in this group, two of the groups are not the only groups which are denied that. A lot of other groups are also there, but highlighting two groups, we can then extend the analysis to other groups of people also who are powerless and are suffering are not able to enjoy or are not having all those other rights which are considered to be essential for a dignified human life. So moving further, I was saying Article 5, I've said no torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment. Then I want to look at 6 also, right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. So when we say as a person before the law, but if we do not make any laws for these persons, the recognition has not still been given. Till NALSA, we had not no legal recognition of their existence, the T community. Article 8, everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. I think 16 is, okay, before 16, 12. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with their privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon their honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. And we know it's a complete denial. All these, most of these are completely denied to the, whether these are persons with different sexual orientation or from away from the binary of being men and women. Freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. We do know that there is a lot of ousting. It's not official, but in actual fact, it exists. 14 has the right, everyone has the right to seek and enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. We need to be aware that lots of LGBT, not the T necessarily, but certainly lesbian, gay, and especially the Muslim gay men have been subjected to so much persecution that many of them have sought asylum on that ground, and asylums have been granted to them on that ground, that they might be lynched in their country if they continue to remain there. So the violence against them of such an intense and high degree that they fear for their life, and many of them, we have reports which tells us that they have been actually killed for their sexual orientation or because of their gender identity. So we kind of said this all, it's only on paper as far as the LGBT community is concerned. Article 16, I was referring that it comes to marriage. It very categorically does not say persons of full age. It says men and women of full age, without any limitation due to race, nationality, religion, have the right to marry and to found a family. And you will find that occurring in the subsequent, in the ICCPR and the other one as well, that when it comes to the other rights in the public sphere, the usage of persons and everyone is a lot more than in the area of family, especially when it comes to marriage. So certainly the demand for marriage or the problem that people who are not in the binary and who are not heterosexual had issues relating to these aspects is certainly not reflected in this era. Marriage shall be entered with free and full consent. So if you start reading men and women as all persons, then the second one also will make relevant, becomes natural, relevant to them. Family is the natural and fundamental group, unit of society, and is entitled to protection by society and the state. So what do we call as family? We said, it's a unit of people connected with each other, either by blood, marriage, or adoption. So which means that a transgender person, if you do not allow them to marry, they cannot have a new family of their own, starting with the marriage. Because the new generation, the blood relationships come, the legitimate blood relationship in our system comes through marriage. If you do not allow them. So even though we say that marriage is the first unit of socialization. The T group of people or the LG group of people, they are not allowed to have that first unit by not recognizing them the right to marry. So certainly they can have only relationship through blood. Adoption also we're not permitting them. So the only family they will have is their natal family, the family they are born into, which doesn't accept them also. So this is kind of really, really hard that something which has been declared time and again as integral and essential, the first right, one of the first rights, it's still being debated. Should they have this right or not? So what is the basis? On what basis do we say they will not have a right to family? Blood family they are born into. But the other two kinds of families, relationships that we recognize for heterosexual people, why, on what ground are we denying them that right?
And procreation. And how?
But no.
I mean, that
When we say
justification.
adoption is not procreation. So we have said family consists of members connected by blood, by marriage, blood, or adoption. So they are not permitted to marry. They are not permitted to adopt. The only relationship they can have is on blood. So what are the circumstances in which they're connected with blood is only with their mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and their children, whatever. But their own line stops. Their own capacity to create the next generation or even a lateral relationship in terms of collateral, the lateral relationships, that goes. So I'm saying, what is the reason on the basis of which? Because at one level, if you see, marriage has got nothing to do with procreation. Procreation can happen without marriage also. It's a physical act. Marriage is a legal act. So the physical act is not the reason for saying you are a family. You're a legitimate family. You can be family, but we say children are illegitimate, born out of wedlock. So do we have any rationale, a reasonable rationale, something which appeals to reason, that if in 1948 we declared this, that the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. So why, on what rationale do we refuse this fundamental, what is this called? Natural and fundamental group unit of society? Why do we exclude, why do we not allow this unit to LGBT? LGBT is not that it's not only they're not allowed to marry, they're not permitted to even adopt. They're not entitled to go for surrogacy. What is our rationale? Is it rational or is it hereditary knowledge and practices? अभी कहा ना किसने, अभिनंदन ने बोला कि किसने बोला कि ये समाज हमारा ऐसे व्यवस्थित है, सो उस व्यवस्था को रैशनल है क्या? है, ये तो सही बात है, दैट्स अ फैक्ट, बट इज देयर अ रैशनल फॉर दैट, or it has been just our ignorance of them? We do not know who these people are because I am not like them. Is there anything beyond that which can justify? So certainly we try to find our support, those people who oppose or who support the exclusion and the non-grant of equal rights are saying religion, social sentiments, morality. But which one of them, whether all of these should be weighed by reference to the Constitution, which is the law of the land, or whether we should then forget the Constitution? So if it says no distinction on any categories, where a lot of categories are listed there, then is there any reason for us to say that no, these people will not have equal rights? So for me to understand what is the rationale, from where is it getting its authority for saying so, accepting for rhetoric, abhi tak aaj tak aisa hua nahi hai. So that's one rhetoric response. But as a legal community, what will be our other when it comes to jurisprudential question, that we have laws certainly, so there's a legal authority to say no, these are not excluded because it's the Hindu law says so, because 370 says so. But what is the principle from where these provisions get legitimacy? So if you start asking that question, then it's easy to see that it is only continuing to maintain hierarchical relationships laid down. The norms have been laid down by the powerful groups in the society, whether they were Brahmins, whether they were Kshatriya, the upper caste, whether these were men, whether these were propertied people. So we have all these categories of people who have created these social structures in a manner as to serve their interests. Everybody else is there to serve the interest of few people. When you look at the story of Adam and Eve, why was Eve created and how Eve came into being as the religious belief, not the scientific category. Religious belief is she was created from the rib of the man. And why? Because the alone man, the lonely man, was getting very lonely. So keep him company, to keep him entertained. And he was created first, then Eve was created. So the very narration as to how humanity came into being is very gendered. The purpose of man was, first God was getting kind of bored with, okay, let me create this fellow. Then this fellow was getting bored, and God is also male. So he created a male in his own image. Then this man was getting bored, so he got the women. So women's job is to do only this one, entertain the men. And then the whole curse has been brought because of the woman. She said, I want this apple. So the whole narration is creating a stereotypical images of who men are. They can be lured into doing things which are really not good for them. So the whole blame is put then onto the woman, and the poor man remains innocent. So the narration of the religious stories of religious texts is also very gendered, and we believe in the truthness of that. Even though today we do know scientifically that there is no way a human being can so far be created from a rib. There are other mechanisms because of which you can create human beings, but who knows? Science is progressing. Maybe someday human beings will be created from the rib, but I do not know whether it will be limited. If that moment does arise, whether it will be limited only to women being created from the rib, or men could also be created from the rib. I'm quite sure that science will not make a discrimination there. It will be able to create human beings, both men and women, and the third from the rib, if at all that happens. So certainly we need to, and unless we start questioning, the existing will not change. So first question we need to ask is that, do we want a change in the existing? Whatever exists, not that everything that exists is bad, but do we have a sense of, some of you did point out the horrifying stories from Arvind Narayan, and this is only one reading. More you read their autobiographies, their writings, more you will learn that what a horrifying life they have. And we have been keeping a blind eye on that. So certainly means if we are horrified, then means that we would want it to change. How will that change come? Unless we start answering the question, why do we have it? What is the justification? From where it has come? So therefore, I certainly want us to raise this question. So let's look at other provisions. This was the one which kind of set me thinking a lot more compared to the other ones, because we have been having this discussion lately about the marriage aspect and the sexuality aspect as well. Then I think in this one, I focused on Article 25. And this I've said in relation to, because all these, the UDHR is preceding not only the Yogyakarta principle and the other resolutions, but also it precedes CEDAW, the Convention against Convention on Discrimination Against Women. So we thought with some of the aspects about women, we can also say motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. So it's again gender neutral, the children, reference to children. It does not take cognizance of the different children. And so certainly, this also lays down the foundation for individual groups of people, first women and then now LGBT community, which is now asking that we need to have specialized conventions and declarations and resolutions pertaining to our plight, because the generic category. Do you know that when earlier census was being done, and people were asked how many children do you have, people were only giving names of the sons. They were not even giving the names of the daughters, realizing that children translates to male children for a lot of people. The census was asking how many daughters, how many sons. Then it was found that children who were disabled were not in the counting. So now we have another column which are saying how many children with disability, how many boys, how many girls. Now I think we have to do the census, and this also is in the report, that we do not have sufficient count of whether there are, how many children are intersex, are born intersex, because we have never asked that question. And the parents would not be able to, even if the parents were to give an answer, there is no column to tick that yes, I have an intersex child. So unless the census or whatever documentation we are doing, it has different categories, we're not going to ask that question. And even if people do want to add some information, you can't do that. You are applying for a passport. If it has got only 2 columns, online forms, if you have got only 2 columns, you have to choose one or the other. Unless it says other and then specify, or it gives you an option of writing your own preference, you are stuck. Presently, all the forms ask you, most of the forms ask you to have your first name, middle name is optional always, and your surname. In my own case, I do not use my surname. Mari is not my surname, but that has gone internationally as my surname, because if you need two parts of the name and I have only first name, so I said, okay, Ved is my first name, Kumari is my surname. So you are forcing people to do something which is not the correct reflection of who they are. So unless you create forms, you create laws, you create norms which are inclusive, people will have to fit into the system that you're provided for, and that's where the whole issue. So let's have a very quick look at the second document, the ICCPR. Certainly, it starts with the reference. Okay, what I did notice also, which I wasn't very clear about earlier, I thought that ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, came earlier, and then it was followed by the other one, but both of them have come on the same day. And actually, the second one, which is the ICESCR, has come into force earlier than the ICCPR. ICCPR came in March 1976, came into force, and ICESCR came into force in January 1976. So this one, ICCPR, starts with recognizing that the rights derived from the rights we're talking about are derived from the inherent dignity of the human person. And everybody is entitled to civil, political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights. So again, when we say everyone, then the question is, there's no question, the interpretation of everyone has to be specifically extended to, and have to be inclusive of consciously. So in a generic term, we said yes. So Article 1 here also says all peoples have the right. What is the, do you know what is the meaning of peoples? I'm asking a grammatical question. Because people itself is plural. So what is peoples?
Refers to like multiple set of communities or societies or like
Nationalities, race.
Yeah.
So whether you are black people, you are white people, you are brown people, you are yellow people, you are fat people, you are Indian people. So peoples is, and the same goes for fish also, by the way, just incidentally. Fish is itself plural, but when we say the fishes, then we are saying different species of fish. The peoples also, so we are saying peoples are also different species of people, which I find a little strange, but that's what the language is about. So all peoples have the right of self-determination. When he says self-determination, usually, what does it refer to? By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. So they can decide their nationality as well as who they will be, not only in the economic terms, but also in social and cultural sense as well. And we do allow them the free determination of political status. To some extent, we have also now in the law set economic status, but social, cultural, still very questionable. Each party, this is Article 2, each state party, now this is the obligation of the state, to the present covenant undertakes to respect and to ensure that all individuals, so certainly this is another term we can peg on to say no discrimination on sexual orientation or on gender identity within its territory and subject to its jurisdiction, the rights recognized in the present covenant without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. The word other status has been used to then kind of refer to the the sexual orientation and the status because of sexual orientation or gender identity. So this has been seen as the keyword in pegging. They say that other status is referring to is inclusive of these other status of social orientation, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Again, in Article 3, instead of saying all, we are saying equal right of men and women to the enjoyment of all civil and political rights set forth in the present covenant. So, do we know what are the rights, civil political rights, which have been dealt with in ICCPR? What is the range of rights? Anyone who has a sense of this? When you look at the covenant, these are primarily the rights in the public sphere. It does not talk about the private sphere. There is some reference, a very small reference, but primarily these are the rights in the public sphere. So contract, criminal law, employment. So things which are happening in the public sphere, and we know public sphere is primarily the male sphere. So civil and political rights are primarily focused on that aspect. And it is in this covenant itself which has created the committee, which then has shifted from all humans to special groups of humans. So in the older, when you compare these older conventions, declarations, etc., you will find the usage of the masculine language, English language, is a lot more prevalent, and nobody questioned it then. But today, if you were to look at convention on the rights of the persons with disability, for example, you will find usage of lot more gender neutral terms. Zero is certainly gendered, it is all about she, women. But when you look at newer conventions, the framers have become more conscious of the language we use. And we do find that there is a lot more, much less usage of he and men and whatever the terminology was used earlier. But certainly, once we say that this terminology does include, then it gives rise to the possibility of pegging a claim on the same words, even though this is using the masculine language. The other provisions which I found somewhat relevant is whole, I think 16 is also in this one. So this is again saying in relation to persons who have been Article 10, in relation to people who have been deprived their liberty, it says all persons deprived of their liberty shall be treated with humanity and with respect for the inherent dignity of the human person. This direction is important when you will read the report on sexual orientation and gender identity, the problems faced by that community, by the committee appointed by the group appointed by the UN to look into that aspect. You will find that there is a lot more violence, much worse kind of violence as well. People who are in incarceration in different scenarios, they're subjected to a lot more sexual violence. So therefore, despite this, they actually get a lot more violence in these scenarios. Then I wanted to refer to 16, I think. Yeah, 16. Everyone, as you know, this is a reiteration of the declaration also, everyone shall have the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. And 17, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference with their privacy, family, home, or correspondence, not through unlawful attacks on his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. And we know that this has not been provided for till date. Tell me, do you know what is the difference between a declaration and a covenant? Then we have got a lot of international instruments, and we have got rules. Then we might have standard minimum rules kind of category. Then we have treaties. Then we have conventions, and we have what do you call them? There's another categories of instruments which are under a convention. But at this point of time, what is the difference between a declaration and a covenant? In terms of impact, in terms of its binding nature.
Ma'am, conventions are legally binding on the countries that agree to sign them, and declarations are adopted by the General Assembly, so they're not legally binding.
Yeah, it's just it's like a symbolic legislation. Nobody signs it. It's just a declaration from the General Assembly that this is what countries should strive for. So when you compare the language in the declaration and the covenant talks about state parties. So covenant and conventions in that sense fall in the similar category. The covenants have, initially I think they were the covenants, and now we have got into the conventions categories. Covenant is coming from the PUDR, and then we have independent areas which certainly have got basis here, but they're not necessarily as a follow-up action. So the treaty is it may be multi-party, it's like a contract. So treaty is between identifiable parties, and they are creating rights and obligations vis-a-vis each other, one another. But when it comes to the convention, which you rightly said, it is a convention where individual parties declare their rights, and it is not vis-a-vis another country, but it is vis-a-vis the convention itself, binding itself that it takes the responsibility. There are two processes which happen. One is the signature, and then there's a ratification. So signature means, yes, I am striving to now get it approved by my home country, by my own state as well. And then we will create legislation also pursuant to that. So there are two stages of the conventions becoming binding on that. And then convention, we also have this thing called the monoist country and the dualist, where some countries have their local, their municipal law saying that the moment that country signs that convention, it becomes automatically part of their municipal law. We are not in that group. We are in the group of countries which says that we will make our municipal laws in consonance with that convention. And Vishakha, in that sense, was an exception, that even though we have signed it, but we have created no law. And that was used by the Supreme Court to say that because we have accepted in principle that we'll make law, but we still haven't made the law, we have a problem, and therefore we'll apply the same standards which have been laid down in CEDAW, and laid down the guidelines in Vishakha using that. So coming back to the convention, to the covenant, we were on ICCPR. These I'm highlighting because these have been highlighted in terms of violation, that all this that we have agreed upon, we have started agreeing that these are essential aspects of a life with dignity and freedom for all. It has been specifically much more aggressively denied to people who are not of this, which are not heterosexual and which do not have the gender identity of the binary. Article 23 again re-emphasizes what was there in the declaration, is here in the covenant also. Family is a natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. In case of transgender, sexual orientation, different sexual orientation, we do not even recognize them the right to have the family. What to talk about the protection of their family. The right of men and women of marriageable age to marry and to found a family shall be recognized. Again, this is not talk about all persons' right to marry. It is still limited to right of men and women to marry. So if we, as a lawyer, we would want to argue that the usage of the word everyone and men and women have to be given different meanings. And therefore, we have been pursuing that line of argument to justify that even the international community does not recognize the right of the others, the people who are not men and women. And we certainly assume that it has to be a heterosexual unit when it comes to marriage. Article 28 creates the committee which has taken the struggle of the different groups forward, and we are going to read their reports. That was all I think I wanted to highlight in this particular covenant. In case of ICESER, very few I thought I'll highlight, otherwise, okay, so this is Article 2, subclause 2, again reiterating no discrimination of any kind, race, color, sex, language, all that we have seen in the earlier one. Article 3, equal right of men and women to enjoy economic, social, cultural rights set forth in the present covenant. So again, the question that people who are not men and women, do they have the equality secured to them by this covenant? We have provisions for fair wages, equal remuneration for work of equal value without distinction of any kind, In particular, women being guaranteed conditions of work not inferior to those enjoyed by men with equal pay for equal work. Again, we are caught in the binary. Decent living for themselves and their families in accordance with the provisions of the present covenant. I want to check out Article 10. The state parties to the present covenant recognize that the widest possible protection and assistance should be accorded to the family, which is the natural and fundamental group unit of society, particularly for its establishment, and while it is responsible for the care and education of dependent children. Marriage must be entered into with the free consent of intending spouse. Special protection should be accorded to mothers during a reasonable period before and after childbirth. During such period, working mothers should be accorded paid leave or leave with adequate social security benefit. In relation to women, uh, what I noticed that the reference of women two contexts have been specifically identified. One is the context of employment, the other is motherhood. So these are the only two areas where we find specific reference to mother. Otherwise, mother and everybody else has been included in the generic provision, the general provisions of equality. I'm not sure that I've got any other article which I wanted to highlight in this. Okay, I've highlighted one more, 13, right to of everyone to education. So what are the ways in which education has been denied? What are the ways in which we have denied education to T? Any thoughts on that?
Ma'am, by not having uh, an environment sensitive enough for them to feel comfortable to go to those schools or in educational institutions. Also, the teachers and the other staff members are also not sensitive enough, and even the government on a national level or state level does not have, I believe, different any laws or any rules for enabling education for transgender communities. No.
You know, this is situation now. Now that we have an option saying fill up other. Previously, I studied in a girls' school. My brother studied in a boys' school. Where would the T go? Where would the T did not have the option of being recognized as a T. So that was in those cases where the family did not throw out the T. If the family said threw out, then who were the people who will look after that T because it's a T? And where will that study? So before NALSA happened, there was no schools available for them unless they went into the binary. So by that itself was excluding. Today we have that, and now we are having the problem which you have just pointed out, Ankit, that there is no inclusiveness. When we talk about sex education, again, it will be heterosexual sex education. There will be no conversation about the other who have a sexual identity issue or a sexual preference or an identity issue. So even when we are one, sex education itself is still contentious. Should it be? Should it not be? How it should be given? To whom should it be given? All that questions. But what are you going to give in that is also important if we're talking about inclusiveness. So unless we start focusing on individual communities, we will start saying general law will take care of everyone. But general law does not take care of everyone, because when we are thinking of who is this general human being, this is all men. So unless we understand the problem of conception itself, in the delivery there will be certainly a problem. All right. Let's go
Ma'am,
back.
uh,
Yeah.
ma'am, even after NALSA and even after this transgender act, the children who have been thrown out of their families have to be taken to the rehabilitation center, and then also they cannot go to school since for admissions you have to have a parent or a guardian.
No, when the provision says rehabilitation center, it does not say that they will be declared unfit, because the term used is not they are unfit to take charge, they're saying they're unable to take charge. So they will remain guardian. They will still remain, the father will still remain the natural guardian. So unless a natural parent is declared as an unfit person, the guardianship doesn't change. That problem will not be there. But first of all, no, where is this rehabilitation center? And who will be living in that rehabilitation center? Only those children who have been, only the T who have been thrown out. Where's the integration then? If they said, at least they could have provided some integration, saying, okay, they will go to the CNCP homes, children in need of care and protection. We call them child care institutions under the Juvenile Justice Act. So they could have said the children will go to the CCI, but no, something new has to be created for them. So one is not even applying their mind to look at the real scenario. And that's where the whole problem of exclusion continues. That even when we are trying to include them, we are still thinking only in exclusionary terms. So, okay, that's. I didn't want to spend more time on this one. This is all done from my side. You can have a reading of these ones. These are actually the background readings for actually looking at the documents, the three sets of documents, I would say, relevant for our course purposes. And these are the Yogyakarta principle, which we are not going to look at today, but we want to look at the committee, which has the resolution and the report of the committee created under the ICCPR. Resolution of 2011. I've skipped reference to Yogyakarta principle, but maybe Yogyakarta principle. I think we should have a read today of the opening parts. We will look at the principles on another day. We have, I think, identified one special day for it. But I want us to today look at the opening introduction to Yogyakarta principles. So one of you will have to read this. Ankit, do you want to do that? Do you have access to Yogyakarta principles?
Yes, ma'am.
So read the opening introductory part. So this sets the stage as to how we move from men and women to the other groups of people. And all these Yogyakarta and the resolutions that we have included in our course material are all focused on the human rights of people with different sexual orientation and in the context of sexual orientation and gender identity. Read.
So it says introduction to the Yogyakarta principles. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. All human rights are universal, independent, indivisible, and
Interdependent.
interdependent, indivisible, and interrelated. Sexual orientation and gender identity are integral to every person's dignity and humanity and must not be the basis for discrimination or abuse.
No, sexual orientation and identity have been defined at the bottom of the page. Let's read that first before we go to the second page, second para.
Sexual orientation is understood to refer to each person's capacity for profound emotional, affectional, and sexual attraction to and intimate and sexual relations with individuals of a different gender or the same gender or more than one gender.
And they've used the word gender here,
Hmm.
not sex, even in sexual orientation. And we have
Now,
been, and we do
gender
find
identity.
gender identity, yes.
Gender identity is understood to refer to each person's deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender which may or may not correspond with the sex assigned at birth, including the personal sense of the body in brackets, which may involve, if freely chosen, modification of bodily appearance or function by medical, surgical, or other means, and other expressions of gender, including dress, speech, and mannerisms.
Right? So very categorically, one is talking about the sexual preference, the other is talking about who am I. Okay, come back to para 2.
Para 2 reads, many advances have been made toward ensuring that people of all sexual orientations and gender identities can live with the equal dignity and respect to which all persons are entitled. Many states now have laws and constitutions that guarantee the rights of equality and non-discrimination without distinction on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Nevertheless, human rights violations targeted toward persons because of their actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity constitute a global and entrenched pattern of serious concern. They include extrajudicial killings, torture and ill treatment, sexual assault and rape, invasions of privacy, arbitrary detention, denial of employment and education opportunities, and serious discrimination in relation to the enjoyment of other human rights. These violations are often compounded by experiences of other forms of violence, hatred, discrimination, and exclusion, such as those based on race, age, religion, disability, or economic, social, or other status. Many states and societies impose gender and sexual orientation norms on individuals through custom, law, and violence, and seek to control how they experience personal relationships and how they identify themselves. The, the policing of sexuality remains a major force behind continuing gender based violence and gender inequality. The international system has seen great strides toward gender equality and protections against violence in society, community, and in the family. In addition, key human rights mechanisms of the United Nations have affirmed states' obligation to ensure effective protection of all persons from discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. However, the international response to human rights violations based on sexual orientation and gender identity has been fragmented and inconsistent. To address these deficiencies, a consistent understanding of the comprehensive regime of international human rights law and its application to issues of sexual orientation and gender identity is necessary. It is critical to collate and clarify state obligations under existing international human rights law in order to promote and protect all human rights for all persons on the basis of equality and without discrimination. The International Commission of Jurists and the International Service for Human Rights, on behalf of a coalition of human rights organizations, have undertaken a project to develop a set of international legal principles on the application of international law to human rights violations based on sexual orientation and gender identity to bring greater clarity and coherence to states' human rights obligations. A distinguished group of human rights experts has drafted, developed, discussed, and refined these principles following an experts meeting held at Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta, Indonesia from 6 to 9 November 2006. 29 distinguished experts from 25 countries with diverse backgrounds and expertise relevant to issues of human rights law unanimously adopted the Yogyakarta Principles on the application of international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity.
Okay, that's enough. I want you to ask, think of ourselves. What is the nature of these principles? If you have read and Ankit certainly has, I'm quite sure some more of you have done this. In which judgment of the Supreme Court these principles were mentioned? NALSA.
Nalsa.
Is there in NALSA. So These are not adopted by General Assembly. These are not adopted by any of the bodies of the United Nations as well. So why would Supreme Court refer to these? What is the authoritative value of these principles? Because just says these are the experts internationally, but experts do not constitute binding precedents. So how has this been made as one of the major sources on the basis of which the NALSA judgment is based? So that's a very curious example that even though these have not been adopted by any international body, they have still acquired a major authority and authoritative sense, even though they're not binding. They are not even persuasive in the same sense in which legal provisions of other countries are. But these are not legal. It's not a legal document. It's a document created by concerned individuals. And even then, it has acquired an authoritative position where Supreme Court of India is relying on this to say, yes, this is correct. So they have acquired legitimacy because they're reporting on the real lives of people. And what they have said, what has been said, and this is a 2006 document. So, and I think adopted in 2007 or 2006. Let me just check the year. 2007. So at that point of time, they what they have said, they have kind of make this mention that there is extrajudicial killings, there are violence, etc. And the report of 2014 actually gives you collection. This is a collections of reports by different bodies, whether these are special rapporteurs on different areas, whether these are committees created under the UN, whether these are some individual NGOs reports, Amnesty International, a whole range of reports they have collated to say, because in 2011, the Human Rights Committee said that we need to have a study done, a systematic study done. Before that, there were individual stories being narrated, and there was no official collection of the stories of violence and killing and torture and abuse and rape, discrimination. So they were not done in a systematic manner, but they were not published in a systematic manner. So the Yogyakarta experts certainly had access to them, but they have not created a compiled volume, but we do get that compiled volume in 2014. So post 2007 Yogyakarta principle, and we will look at the principles. What are the, I forget now whether it's 15 or more principles in that list. Some of them, not all of them, have been mentioned in the NALSA judgment. Some of them have been picked up, and certainly there's been 10 more added after after the NALSA judgment in 2007. NALSA judgment is which year? I forgot. NALSA is
14, I think.
14, 15, I think. So the plus 10 have been added in 2017. And the fact that we are still identifying more areas of concern on which focused attention has to be given so that things can improve is showing that, one, the visibility of the issues of transgender and of the gender issues of sexual orientation and gender identity has become more prominent, and more concerted efforts are being made. The report also gives us examples of what are the new ways in which these challenges are being addressed in a number of countries. So I think we need to actually, I'm insisting on this, that each one of you, please look at the 2014 report, which is a compilation of what are the, and also this one starts with saying that there is a pattern of violence. So it is not that it is a random incident here, a random incident there. These are international patterns, in some countries more prominent than others. And there are a number of countries which are moving forward. There has been a lot of resistance from the Islamic countries against adopting these documents by the UN. Today, till date, we do not have any declaration against discrimination based on sexual orientation or identity, because, and also the language is taking a lot more time, because when we talk about international documents, especially conventions and instruments which are binding on countries, these usually contains much lower standards than what is absolutely ideal, because you have to take lots of countries along. So at one level we say this is the international standard, but the international standard is many times much lower than the ideal standard. But you want every country to sign, then you have to take cognizance, keep in mind the concerns of each country. And Muslim countries have been resisting, Islamic countries have been resisting it a lot more to legitimize or to mainstream or to provide equal rights to, especially in the group when it is sexual orientation is concerned. And there are scholars who are working on that. There's one line of thought in the Islamic world which says that same-sex relationships are prohibited by God, by Quran, and others who read it differently. And I've seen a film, a documentary done on an Australian Maulvi who openly declared that he was gay, and he was shunned and ousted from his country, from Australia. And a few years later, because of his work and his explanation, he was again called back, and he's now an honored member of the Muslim community there. So there's a very, I think it was called, let me just check, Love Jihad. I think it was called Love Jihad. Very, very powerful documentary. Talking, especially the whole documentary starts with him, ends with him, but it shows lots of other people, women, people from different countries who have shared their experiences, the real people. And certainly their faces are not visible unless they have permitted the producers to do that. But that was a collection of, again, saying that this other thought that Islam is contrary to same-sex relationship is being questioned by a number of scholars within the community itself also. So certainly, but the recognized fact is that we know that the progress in this area is very slow. It's not happening. It's happening very slowly because of resistance of some countries. So at the international level, when we are creating documents, one has to be sensitive to the needs of different groups of people, because one international law does not have the same mechanisms for enforcement as the municipal laws have. So the only manner in which it gets enforced is to take people along, to accommodate their concerns, to pacify different groups of people. So one is the lot of communication has to continuously happen. What is the mechanism today, in your understanding, for implementing an international convention? What is the latest trend there? What are the principles which are followed? How do these international conventions, even when they're binding, are implemented? Wherever they're not at all binding, they've got no force, and we know that there is no imprisonment for countries which do not fulfill their obligations. Why are we spending so much time on international documents?
Ma'am, maybe there are sanctions, economic sanctions. I'm not aware of that.
Economic sanctions happen in Security Council resolutions when there is act of war aggression. What you call as International Criminal Court, that jurisdiction violation, and genocide, and there are crimes against humanity. So that's a long-run process and very, very exceptional process. We have, what I understand is there's the latest policy, and it is there in most of the later convention. It was not there earlier, but now we call it a policy of name and shame. Most of the conventions have some committee appointed there to monitor its implementation. And countries are obligated to file periodical reports of the progress made under that convention. So that progress report is filed not only by the state, but there are shadow reports also filed by non-state bodies, whether NGOs, whether community members, universities, any set of people can file those shadow reports. So shadow reports then are compared with the state report, and state is asked to answer what has been highlighted as the violations or obstacles pointed by the non-state actors. So those reports are public. You can look at a report of any country and every country on the net. These are accessible to just everybody across the world. The committees then makes recommendations back to the nation, to the state, to the state party, pointing out that these are the flaws we have found and you should take actions. So it is only that you will be shamed in the international community if you don't do that. And today, when we are talking about global is local, every country has got geopolitical, economic relationship with the others. And in order to have good relations in all aspects of the state politics, it is important to be seen as the best country, whether there's human rights violation, whether it's bureaucracy, whether it's corruption. And therefore, every country seeks to create that image for itself. And that is the process of, especially in the human rights area, that's the process of implementing those rights which are granted by these conventions, covenants, etc. So therefore, study of those country reports are very, very useful to understand where my country stands in the eyes of the UN bodies. And then the country also writes back to saying that on the recommendation of the committee, what actions have been taken, what is the justification for the state. So it's a very transparent manner in which these conversations takes place. And that helps the international community to, and international NGOs and activists and the human rights groups to keep track of what is happening in which country. With the internet, with the internet, all this has become very, very easily accessible to everybody. So what we call is the process of naming and shaming has been seen to be a very effective method of implementing and enforcing human rights. Certainly, it may be contentious that is it equal to enforcement of the municipal law, which is backed by penal punishments. When you're talking about sanctions, there's been a whole school of thought also that restorative justice is much better than criminal justice. Criminal justice, which alienates the accused person, puts the blame on some people, puts the burden on the state. Individuals are not involved. They never, once a criminal remains a criminal always. So these are very negative things, and that we need to follow, even in the municipal law, a different approach of acceptance, persuasion, inclusion, rather than ousting the people who are doing something wrong, because wrongs also have a causation as to why did they do so. So there's a lot of thinking happening even at the municipal area as to what is the best way to deal with wrongdoers. So it's not limited only to the international community. The resolution of 2011 is a very short resolution, which primarily kind of says, it is the first time recognition that there is a need to look at the issue. From 2011, they said, recalling further, this is the resolution 2011 of the Human Rights Committee, Human Rights Council. This is resolution adopted by the Human Rights Council, Human Rights, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. The Council recalls the universality, interdependence, indivisibility, interrelatedness of human rights as enshrined in UDR and the two covenants, recalling also the UDHR, and affirms that all human beings are born free. So all that we have read, it's all reiterated here, recalling further General Assembly resolution of March 2006, in which the Assembly stated that the Human Rights Council should be responsible for promoting universal respect for the protection of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction of any kind and in a fair and equal manner, expressing grave concern at acts of violence and discrimination in all regions of the world committed against individuals because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. So that's where Human Rights Council's area of watch was increased, extended by this resolution of 2011. So the council then requests the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights to commission a study to be finalized for December 2011, documenting discriminatory laws, gender identity on regions of the world, and how international human rights law can be used to end violence and related human rights violations and based on human rights violations based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So it was pursuant to, this is the resolution of 2011. Then we have the report, which we want to study tomorrow. And I will urge all of you to read that resolution. No, the Human Rights Council, this is I think 2011. So the report has come as a consequence of this resolution, which I just read out. And this report we want to study tomorrow. So that then we will go back to the CEDAW and Yogyakarta principles in the next week. I urge you all again that read this. As some of you have pointed out that reading Arvind Narayan was an eye-opener. Reading this report will also be very useful in understanding that it is not limited to one area or region. Different kinds of things are happening in different parts, and there is a pattern of discrimination, violence, killing, etc. Rape is not only of the men, but also of the lesbian women. And it's kind of, rape is faced by both gays and lesbians, by people who do not, who, in case of women, forced pregnancy is seen as a way to cure them. Their motherhood will come out. They will become heterosexual once they have been raped. So this is horrifying explanations from my perspective, which are being given, and the force has been used to convert them into normal human beings. This is an important report for all of us to read. We'll have some discussion on it tomorrow. I'll see if I can. I had at one point of time certain portions from Love Jihad. I'll see whether I still have them and share some of the videos with you. But it is your job to come out with what are the trends now, what are the measures being taken to deal with the problem. So first we will have a small discussion on the range of issues faced, and then what are the steps being taken, what are the recommendations of this committee. Then we can have a look at some of the clips I have. I can see people are marking their presence. So we are ready to go today. We'll meet tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am.